contingency plans for his death were made during his treatment for coronavirus. And Iran moves to ease restrictions as the number of new coronavirus cases begins to slow. Thank you for joining us on the program. We start in Afghanistan, where officials have launched an investigation into reports of Iranian border guards torturing Afghan migrants and throwing them into a river where some drowned. Afghan officials have begun recovering the bodies from the Harir Ud River, where survivors say at least 23 migrants drowned. According to initial reports from Afghanistan's foreign ministry, at least 70 Afghans trying to enter Iran were beaten and pushed into the water. Iran has denied the allegations. The Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission has called on Afghan government to take the issue to the International Court of Justice and the United Nations. Now, there is a history of violent clashes between Afghan migrants and Iranian police on the border. For more on this, let's bring in Bilal Sarwari. He's in Kabul for us. Bilal, what more can you tell us about this probe and what has been the reaction to it so far?
Well, Afghanistan's acting foreign minister, Mohammad Anif Atmar, has condemned this and he said that he's tasking his deputy foreign minister in charge for political affairs to investigate this. This is Afghanistan's very deep and open wound, the issue of refugees, the issue that Afghans have to really flee for economic reasons to Iran and Pakistan, most of the time illegally. In this case, we have heard from some of the victims and their family members. They are saying that Iranian border guards really started shooting towards them, including little children. And when some of them ran towards the water, when they couldn't swim, they drowned. Some bodies have been recovered. And it sort of just shows you how volatile the situation remains for ordinary people. People are fleeing Afghanistan because they really don't see any hope in this country.
Right, war-torn country, on top of everything, COVID-19. Do we know how many cases is there in Afghanistan? We are hearing that some testing has been done and that it shows how the situation is extremely serious in Afghanistan.
Well, the testing capability is very limited. It's mostly in bigger cities. It's something that rich Afghans or Afghans in the government with connections have access to. There are fears that the actual numbers could be much higher. And I think with that comes the fact that a lot of people are suffering because of poverty. So Afghanistan, unfortunately, has this COVID-19 problem like the rest of the world, but it has poverty and it has a war to really fight, and at the same time political leaders still are not in agreement. So Afghans are hoping that there will be a functioning government, a government that can provide for people, a government that can look after people. And there are some serious allegations of corruptions in some cases by the Afghan officials where they should have helped victims. Allegedly they have stolen money. So Afghans are not only confused, but they are extremely scared and worried about multiple challenges all at the same time.
Right, okay, we'll leave it there for now. Bilal Sarwari, live for us from Kabul. Now, as Bilal was saying, Afghanistan has seen its biggest daily jump of COVID-19 cases with 235 new infections. The war-torn country has also recorded 12 deaths in the past 24 hours. Now, with the latest figures, the total number of infections stands over 2,700 and the death toll has reached 85. Kabul, which is the country's worst affected area, has been under lockdown for 2 months. In Spain, the lowest daily coronavirus death toll has been recorded after almost 50 days of one of the world's strictest lockdowns to stop the outbreak. Now, people over the age of 14 are now permitted outside to exercise during allocated hours. It's part of a four-phase plan to ease restrictions over the next 2 months. The latest daily death toll is 164, taking the total number of deaths to over 25,200. That's the fourth highest in the world. Well, officials have also released other more promising figures about the spread of the virus in Spain. Journalist Ashish Sharma explains.
Fernando Simon, who is the director for the Center of Health and Alert and Emergencies here in Spain, gave some facts which I thought were very interesting. He was talking about the rate of contagions over the period of this lockdown. They were taken every 2 weeks to show the time period for the gestation of the virus to show itself. On the 23rd of March, they had something like 231 infections per 100,000 people. 2 weeks later, that figure had gone down to 125, and the latest figures that have just come out show that figure has gone down even further to just 54. So this is a good example that the government is highlighting about how this plan of having people in lockdown has really helped reduce the rate of infections and the rate of contagions. Of course, the government says and knows with the figure, even though it's as low as it has been today, there are still people dying and there are still people being infected. And so they are stressing that despite the warm weather and the fact that people are out and about to enjoy themselves a little bit more in terms of relaxation, they have to take care and they have to bear in mind social distancing. They're talking about, for example, from Monday onwards now, you will be able to go into certain commercial places. So, for example, garages, restaurants, as long as they're only doing takeaway food that has been ordered in advance, will be allowed to function, as will bookshops. Again, this will be a case of you make a pre-order and then you can come in and you can pick up your book or get your services done or pick up your food. And it can only be one employee per client. So those are the very, very strong restrictions, but at least these places will be allowed to open.
Turning to France now, where officials are also looking to ease lockdown measures for the first time since the 17th of March. France has recorded almost 170,000 infections. That's the fifth highest in the world, and over 24,000 deaths. Miranda Lin has more from Paris.
Once the lockdown measures are eased, it will allow people to leave their homes more freely. They will be able to gather into groups of at least of no more than 10 people. Schools will also start opening up again. But as far as the health emergency extension, if that is adopted, which isn't guaranteed yet either, if that's adopted, one of the main measures is it will allow the government to restrict the travelers coming into France, both foreign travelers and French nationals. It will require them to go into quarantine for 2 weeks and potentially isolation. The exact details of what that will entail haven't been released yet, and the French health minister said that those exact details will be announced in a separate decree later on. So there is still some lack of clarity exactly on what that the extended health emergency could entail. And there has been some opposition from political parties saying that they worry that this restriction on freedom of movement and people's civil liberties without any other oversight, without any deadline for when that will be, for how long that could last, is also a concern for them. But what we need to keep in mind is that this is still the first phase of French government's plan to ease the lockdown restrictions. It's expected to last until June 2nd, at which point they'll reassess what kind of numbers we're looking at. The past few days have looked very encouraging for France. They started to trend downward. On Saturday, the number of deaths was down to 166, which is the lowest number they've had since March 22nd, so for nearly 2 weeks. But there is still concern that once these lockdown measures are lifted, that those numbers could spike again. And so it's giving the government is giving itself some leeway that it could reintroduce stronger lockdown measures even after they're eased on Monday.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has revealed during an interview with Sun newspaper that a contingency plan was made for his death while he was in intensive care last month. Johnson says he was given liters of oxygen to keep him alive, and doctors had made a plan in the event of his death. The Prime Minister returned to work on Monday, 1 month after testing positive for COVID-19. The UK is among the worst countries in the world, with over 183,000 confirmed cases and more than 28,000 deaths. Yoav David is in London for us with more details of what the Prime Minister revealed during that interview.
He used his usual language, which is quite colourful, quite descriptive, and he said he needed litres and litres of oxygen. But what we really want to know is, does that mean 1 litre? Does it mean 5 litres? Does it mean 50 litres? Because that would really, those kind of facts would explain to us how ill he was. But one thing is certain. He obviously realises that he was very ill and he needed to be hospitalised after carrying the symptoms of the coronavirus for a few days and still conducting his work as Prime Minister. And then around the day that the Queen made her address to the people who live in Britain, then he was hospitalised, of course, within hours and for the next 7 days. So what is interesting, I remember when the government were conducting their daily briefings, different ministers, especially Dominic Raab as the First Minister, who stepped in because Boris Johnson couldn't be Prime Minister at that time, he was asked every day, when was the last time he spoke to Johnson? When, in a way, when were the powers handed over to him as the caretaker or interim leader? He was never very clear or forthcoming about it, and neither is Johnson in the interview with the newspaper. There is a lot of language which explains some of the emotion around the background, but there's no distinct facts in terms, or even timeline, of what happened when.
Now, in Iran, the death toll from COVID-19 infections has risen by 47 over the past 24 hours alone, taking the national tally to more than 6,000. But the infection rate is slowing, with the country recording 802 new cases. That's the lowest it has been in 2 months. Well, this has led to an easing of some restrictions, with the government today announcing that mosques will reopen on Monday and Friday prayers will resume in 132 regions that have been declared safe. Well, for more on this, Reza Khatami joins me now from Tehran. Reza, this will be welcomed by many Iranians. I mean, having in mind that it's Ramadan, but it's still, even if the mosques are opened again, I assume people will have to follow some social distancing rules, right?
Yes, as you said, the total death toll is now over 6,200 and the number of confirmed cases has passed 97,000. Officials reported 47 deaths on Saturday. Now we have witnessed a gradual decrease in the number of daily deaths and infections for the past several weeks, and this has prompted the government to gradually ease the restrictive measures, and the latest is that in 132 so-called white zones or low-risk areas in the country, the mosques will be reopened as of tomorrow, and Friday prayers will be held there while observing health protocols. The government is also planning to reopen the schools in the white zones as of May the 16th. Iran has divided the country into 3 white, yellow, and red zones based on the number of deaths, infections, and hospitalized patients. And the government also said that a decision has been made on the reopening of some high-risk businesses like beauty salons and some sports centers. And in another development, as the capital city is getting more and more crowded, the government has made wearing masks mandatory on Tehran public transportation, and police have been deployed at Tehran metro stations to make sure that every passenger is wearing a mask.
Right. Still, Reza, can relaxing of the restrictions be dangerous? I mean, Iran is one of the worst hit countries in the Middle East. Are everyone on the same page when it comes to easing the restrictions?
The Deputy Health Minister has warned that a second and third wave of infections are likely in fall, and President Rouhani today, as he was announcing the easing of restrictions, was cautious. He said that although the situation has greatly improved, we should be pessimistic. He said that there is a high probability that this coronavirus may peak again. He pointed to the fact that no vaccine or medication has been made for this virus so far. But he said that his government's decision to ease some restrictions is based on the fact that many people are observing health protocols. He provided the statistics that showed 83% of people are now observing health protocols provided by the health ministry. But the government has time and again said that these easing of restrictions are reversible, and the restrictions and restrictive measures are can be reimposed if the situation gets worse. But Iran maintains that its health infrastructure is strong and it is ready for a possible escalation of the crisis. But it is complaining about the U.S. sanctions. It has said that these sanctions have hampered its efforts to contain the coronavirus pandemic and its economic impact on ordinary Iranians.
Reza Hatami, live for us from Tehran. Thanks so much for that, Reza. Plenty ahead after the break, including an exchange of gunfire on the border between North and South Korea. And the beat from the street. A Turkish city cleaner shares his COVID-19 experience. That's coming up after the break.
Virunga National Park in the Congo, home to the planet's last remaining mountain gorillas.
I'm not a father, but I'm a mother.
But the park's very existence is now under threat.
When they announced their intentions to explore for oil, we informed them that it was not legal.
They will want their slice of the cake. They are playing with forces that are extremely powerful and dangerous.
Nominated for Best Documentary at the Oscars.
Alors, pourtant notre sujet est que ce parc reste immortel.
Storyteller Virunga on TRT World.
We all want to understand our world. The news is important, but to really get it, you've got to get personal. Here on The Nexus, we look behind the big events, the big headlines, with the people who are in the story. What drives them? What makes them tick?
The bill is dead.
Sometimes serious, sometimes fun. Always human and never compromising on the facts. Analysis that will get you thinking. Nexus on TRT World.
Welcome back to TRT World. Good to have you with us. Here's a reminder of our top stories this hour. Afghan officials have launched an investigation into claims that Iranian border guards tortured and threw dozens of Afghan migrants into a river. At least 23 migrants have drowned. Some of them are still missing. Spain has recorded the lowest daily death toll from the new coronavirus in 7 weeks, with 164 people dying from the disease in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, the Spanish government has initiated the first phase of a plan to ease restrictions over the next 2 months. The Iranian government has announced the reopening of mosques in the virus-hit country from Monday. Well, this comes as the country has seen more than 6,000 deaths from coronavirus outbreak, but number of new cases is slowing down. Israel's Supreme Court is hearing a number of petitions launched against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his unity government agreement. Now, the country's top court is currently hearing arguments that Netanyahu should not be eligible to lead the country while facing criminal charges. Netanyahu recently signed a deal with his former political rival Benny Gantz to form a unity government. Now, if the court voids Netanyahu's ability to serve as Prime Minister, it would likely to trigger the fourth consecutive election in just over 12 months. Well, Israel's Attorney General says there are no legal obstacles to Netanyahu forming a unity government. TRT World's Mustafa Fatih Yavuz is in occupied East Jerusalem, and he has more on that.
Well, the main reason behind of this decision of Avichai Mandelblit, the Attorney General of Israel, is actually basic law. The basic law of Israel says that a prime minister can be forced to step down only if this prime minister is convicted with these legal charges. So far, Netanyahu is not convicted. He is indicted with 3 different corruption charges that he's going to face trials on May 24th. That's why Avichai Mandelblit said that despite inherent difficulties, there is no legal impediment to tasking Netanyahu with the mandate to form a government. In his previous court rulings, he was actually saying that an indicted cabinet member can be forced to step down, but it cannot be applied to a prime minister because of the prime minister's more significant role comparing to a cabinet minister. When we look at Israeli media and Israeli journalists following this court ruling, saying that so far 4 of 11 judges who are going to decide Netanyahu's fate are actually in favor of Netanyahu's staying in power. If those 4 are, as we heard, it's correct, Netanyahu needs 2 more judges saying that Netanyahu can stay in power. This is what we expect, actually. According to Israeli media and according to legal experts, we can say that Netanyahu can stay in power. But the other issue is whether Netanyahu and Gantz coalition can stay in power next week, because they were offering some changes for their government, such as 36 months old of a government. Normally in Israel, 4 years only for a government, but right now they were offering 3 years. If it passes, we can see in the next week also Netanyahu and Gantz government.
North and South Korea have exchanged gunfire in the demilitarized zone, which divides the 2 countries. Now, the South Korean military says North Korean troops shot several bullets at one of their guard posts in the border town of Cheorwon. The South responded with 2 warning rounds. It's the first such incident since 2017 and comes only 2 days after Pyongyang's state media released video of leader Kim Jong-un's first public appearance in 20 days. Well, Leonid Petrov is a North Korea researcher at the International College of Management, Sydney, and he explains the motive behind North Korea's latest move.
Just was no sooner that Kim Jong-un appeared after the 20 days of absence and major speculations about his health and well-being. The North Korean troops start shooting. Indeed, it looks like Kim Jong-un is trying to demonstrate who is calling shots in North Korea and the Korean Peninsula, but also the timing of this inter-Korean rise in conflict and confrontation is very symbolic. Just 1 year ago, the important declaration was signed between the North and South of Korea. South Koreans planned even to reconnect the inter-Korean railway along the eastern coast of the Korean Peninsula, very kind of bypassing the potential conflict with United Nations Security Council resolution. And it looks like Kim Jong-un is simply trying to send the message that don't try even to improve relations with us. Don't even think to reconnect the railway tracks. Don't think about engagement or cooperation because we're still at war. The inter-Korean conflict, which started 70 years ago, actually hasn't finished. In 1950, North Korea tried to unify the peninsula by force, and the United Nations command tried to restore the border between North and South, even tried to unify the peninsula by force, but intervention from China prevented.
Now, lockdowns and stay-at-home orders have led to quiet streets, even in the big cities, like here in Istanbul. Now, we spoke to one Turkish street cleaner about his experience during the pandemic. Take a look.
İsmim Yavuz Yıldız. 11 yıldır Fatih Belediyesi'nde çalışıyorum. 8 yıldır Eminönü'nde bu tarihi güzel yerde çalışıyorum. Tabii ki bu koronavirüsten dolayı sürekli temizlik yapıyoruz halkımızın sağlığı için. Sağlık çalışanlarımız çok değerli, çok önemli. Biz de bu ülkenin gizli kahramanlarıyız. 7/24 sürekli sahadayız. Yıkama araçlarımız olsun, dezenfekte araçlarımız olsun, ilaçlama araçlarımız olsun. Fatih Belediyesi olarak 24 saat sahada halkımız için hizmet veriyoruz. Dışarıda kimse yok. Sokağa çıkma yasağı ya da bu virüsten dolayı. Ama daha önce çok kalabalıktı. Virüsten önce çok yoğun çalışıyorduk. 8 saat hiçbir dakika durmadan çalışıyorduk. Gün oluyordu, biz artık temizlik yapamıyorduk. O kadar kalabalıktı ki çekiliyorduk yani. Çünkü insanlar rahatsız oluyordu. Ya süpürgemiz değiyordu kendisine, ya paraşımız değiyordu kendisine. Ama şu an işte çok sakin, gördüğünüz gibi siz de. Ama şu an bir sıkıntı yok. Şu an sokaklar bomboş ama biz bundan da memnun değiliz. İstiyoruz ki buralar yine simitçilerimiz, mısır satanlar, kestane satanlar, insanlar burada yoğun olsun, esnaf iş yapsın. Ülkemiz için bu çok önemli. Umarım en kısa sürede de halkımızla beraber bunu çözeriz ve bunu bitiririz. Yeter ki ülke normale dönsün, ekonomimiz düzelsin. Yani biz temizleyelim. Bizim işimiz bu.
That's the news for now. Headlines are up next.